Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Deal. Michigan getting right in 2025. It's pretty much on every single Michigan fan's minds over the last couple of weeks until, as Michigan fans ourselves, every time I talk to you off the podcast, we're pretty much talking about rebuilding Michigan for 2025. So we figured, Dill, we might as well put a plan together right now, kind of combine the thoughts that we've had with a lot of the Michigan fans in the comment section, kind of put together a little bit of a plan. It's kind of our duty, if you will, to put a plan together to get Michigan right in 2025. Fired up to get into this one. We're going to talk about not only the coaching staff, the quarterback conversation, including Bryce Underwood, transfer portal targets, but for the Michigan fans, They'll massive shout out to the Michigan fans. Like y'all know it's our team. It's been a tough last couple of weeks. The Michigan fans continue to show a ton of love to the boys. We can't thank y'all enough. But I think more importantly for this, let it fly in the comment section. We're going to go coaching staff position by position, talk about what positions we'd like to see Michigan go after in the transfer portal. Would love to hear from you guys as well. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. This is going to be a conversation we're having a lot over the next couple of weeks and months. Fired up to get into it. Let's start at the top, and let's start with the coaching staff. Sherrone Moore. I more want to get into the discussion about the coordinators, right? Kurt Campbell being number one, Wink Martindale being another talking point that I'm sure some Michigan fans have, kind of some conflicted views on. Let's start with Kurt Campbell. I think a lot of Michigan fans are probably in agreement. It's in the best interest of this Michigan program to go elsewhere at the offensive coordinator at the end of 2024. Dill, thoughts on the offensive coordinator spot? And I think more importantly, any names that you would like to see Michigan potentially pursue in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be stunned, frankly, if Kurt Campbell's back. And again, I don't know that he's got the right ingredients to really have a great offense right now. You look like the quarterback position is just not good enough. The wide receiver position is not good enough. And frankly, the offensive line hasn't been good enough. So he hasn't had a ton to work with. But again, you look at the way they execute at team or against teams that they're far superior to, it's just not good enough. And I think I look at Shirron Moore. I don't think he should make the mistake that like a Lincoln Riley seems like he's making at
Agreed.
USC, where yes, Sherrone Moore was the offensive coordinator, a really good offensive coordinator in his own right. I think you take the Ryan Day approach, frankly. I think you try to hire your best coordinators at both spots, guys who you really trust who have done it. I mean, Kurt Campbell, again, like really had no experience as a big-time offensive coordinator. I think he had like a year and a half or something at Old Dominion and got fired. So again, you look – I think they should be really big game hunting for that spot. I think, frankly, any team like Michigan, those real big dogs who can afford to pay those type of coaches, really should have two high-level coordinators, no matter what side of the ball the
And
head coach wants.
especially when you're not paying Sherrone Moore all that much money. Like you have, so you spend a lot of money on Wink Martindale. Why not go spend the same amount of money at a big-time offensive coordinator? I'm with you, Dill. I love the Lincoln Riley comparison. But like part of being a head coach at a massive program like Michigan, it's making some hard decisions. And I know Kurt Campbell's probably his guy, but it's going to be a hard decision. But I think we all kind of agree it's the right decision to go in a different direction. I think Sherrone Moore kind of needs to learn from Lincoln Riley, who stuck
And you've
with
seen
Alex Grinch.
other coaches have had to make it. I mean, you see Dabo had to make it. Obviously, Ryan Day had to make it. Like, I think you're seeing that gone are the days where a coach can essentially be one of the coordinators. I think, again, with what Sherrone Moore, and I also don't know that Sherrone Moore is like the greatest offensive coordinator in the world. He's a great program developer, culture creator. I think you look at what he did with that offensive line. But I never got the sense he was like a killer in terms of just straight play calling. Like you look across the country, I look at a guy like Brennan Marion at UNLV. That's my guy as the coordinator. I look like he's a great play caller. It feels like no matter who he's got, whether he's got a throwing quarterback, a running quarterback, he just works. They move the ball at that school and they're really creative. So I'm looking like I want that type of guy, just like a real elite play caller who's proven it now long enough as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and Brennan Marion's a weapon on the recruiting trail. And I think that'll probably be an emphasis for Sherrone Moore, too. Like, you want to go get a really good play caller, but you want to get a guy that, can recruit elite talent, recruit elite quarterbacks, recruit elite wide receivers. I think that'll be in the conversation, but I think we all agree, like, a change needs to be made at the offensive coordinator position. Dill, let's get into where me and you disagree a little bit. That's the defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale. I'm going to give you the floor, but I think more importantly, like, we're going to need a tiebreak here. And I think that's going to come from you guys in the comment section. Dill, I'll give you, I'm not going to let you go over a minute because you might just go 10 minutes. Wink Martindale, why you want him back with Michigan in 2025.
I think the fundamental thing is I think it's still really hard to judge this Michigan defense because, again, you look at the amount of times Michigan's offense goes 3 and out, it's got to be leading the country. And I don't have the stat in front of me, but my eyeballs are
It's
telling
high.
me the 3 and outs on this program are way too high, and it's really hard to play defense, especially in a bit of a rebuilding year where you're not probably as deep as you have been. Because, again, we've talked about it. Harbaugh just wasn't recruiting at a particularly high level for the past 2 years. So I think the cupboards are a little bit bare. They're not super deep. And hence, when you have an offense that can't stay on the field, it's really tough as a defensive coordinator. And they've been dealing with a lot of injuries. So I think he should get another shot. You see defensive coordinators routinely improve in their second years. And he's proven it for a long time. Like, love him or hate him, but he's been a really good coach for Brent.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you, Dill, we last had this conversation last night, and we've had this conversation a lot over the last 2 weeks, me and you. I've kind of changed my tune a little bit, and I'm kind of more close to the Wink Martindale back in 2025. Now, I'm not as high as you are with Wink Martindale, but I'll give you the reason why he should be back in 2025. One, the recruiting on the defensive side of the football, it's going in the right direction. That's pretty clear. You are right. It's hard for a defense to put up good numbers in any way when you're running opposite of an offense like this. I think most importantly, it's kind of the Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter conversation where Wink Martindale runs a complex defense. And you remember when we hired Mike McDonald from the NFL, it was a really good defense. And I think the personnel was a little bit better, but there were some growing pains in terms of alignment, in terms of guys knowing what they were doing. It got much better year 2. I know it was Jesse Minter, but it got much better under kind of that same system. I think you'd see the same thing. Like, I think there are some growing pains year 1 with Wink Martindale that you probably avoid in year 2. Now, I'm not expunging Wink Martindale because I do still think this defense has underperformed. At the end of the day, you probably got 3 first-round NFL draft picks on the defensive line. I know Will Johnson hasn't played, but a legitimate top 10 pick at the cornerback spot. I do still think this defense has underperformed to its talent, but with all the injuries and what you said is really important too, just the lack of depth that this defense has. I'm willing to give Wink Martindale year 2 because I do think you're right. Like, you see year 2 defensive coordinators take massive steps in the right direction. That's the take on the coordinators. Let's get into what's probably the most important conversation in Michigan's offseason. If the boys were smart, we probably would have led with this conversation. Deal the quarterback spot. Now, I'll start. I think there's 3 options that Michigan has in front of them. One, and the biggest option, is you go and get Bryce Underwood. And if you get Bryce Underwood, I don't even think you go to the transfer portal. And it's not like Michigan wouldn't want to go to the transfer portal because you're probably looking at a quarterback room of Bryce Underwood and Jaden Davis, which is thin and young.
You can't.
But what quality transfer portal quarterback are you going to get to come in with Bryce Underwood? You're just not going to play.
That is a fundamental issue. If they get him, it's going to be like what Nebraska's dealing with Dylan Raiola. Like, you kind of know who's going to be the guy. So it's like a Cam Ward type quarterback looking. Michigan's not going to be a super attractive destination because, again, like, you kind of have your heir apparent. You have the guy who's going to be kind of the future of that program. So, again, like, I'll take that any day. And if we have to deal with some rookie mistakes next year, sign me up. Bryce Underwood, I don't care what happens. Like,
I've said this so many times. Like, y'all know I talk a lot about the quarter on the recruiting trail, and this is the most talented quarterback I've seen come out of high school since Trevor Lawrence. Like, this kid checks so many boxes, and he's played so much football. He's been starting since his freshman year of high school. And so, yeah, there'll be some adjustments. There'll be some growing pains. You do everything you can to get Bryce Underwood, period. And if you do get him, you're probably not getting a transfer portal quarterback. Second option, and this is a two thing. This is an intriguing option. There's been some buzz around Malik Washington, who's committed to Maryland. Obviously, Coach Locksley's on the hot seat at Maryland. Michigan's checking in on Malik Washington, who's a top 100 national prospect, one of the best quarterbacks in the class in his own right. Could you get him if you don't get Bryce Underwood? And then could you maybe, if Coach Locksley gets fired from Maryland, go get Coach Locksley as your offensive coordinator? Dill, to me, look, I'd still take Bryce Underwood. That is by far my number one choice because you get 3 years of just a special quarterback. If you're telling me we could get Coach Lock as an offensive coordinator who's a proven offensive coordinator and a great recruiter and has experience being a head coach and a very talented quarterback in Malik Washington, Dill, that's not a bad second option for Michigan at the quarterback spot.
No, and Locksley's kind of the type of guy, again, one of the other types you maybe want as a coordinator. Again, maybe that's obviously basically hiring Chip Kelly in a sense. And again, I think Ohio State, that was a smart move by them to do that. I think you do something similar with Locksley. Again, a guy who I also think can just help Shirron Moore out in terms of managing this program. Now, he's never obviously had to be the head coach on the level that Shirron Moore is. I mean, Maryland, Michigan are different programs. But again, he's been around some great ones, spent a lot of time in Alabama, has run the show at a couple stops now. Locksley'd be a really nice addition. And then obviously, I mean, that'd probably be a foregone conclusion. If he comes, then Malik Washington's coming too.
Dude,
and Malik start to reload that pipeline, if you will, at the quarterback spot.
Now, you get Malik Washington, you probably have to go to the transfer portal because I don't think Malik Washington is that ready-made day one starter that Bryce Underwood is. But I think you could go to I think with Coach Lock, I think you could go to the transfer portal and get a really quality quarterback. And then the third option, and probably the least appealing, I should say, no quarterback in the 2025 class, which 0 are currently committed. Then you got to go heavy in the transfer portal, and you have to use that money, all that money we're hearing about to get Bryce Underwood to come to Michigan, and use it on a transfer portal quarterback, which is not a bad option. I think the issue is you have to convince a quarterback to come in that this offense is going to be different. Now, Dill, getting into the next position group, that's the wide receiver spot, you're going to need to get a quarterback first, right? If you are a wide receiver that has hit the transfer portal and you look at this Michigan team, you got to know who's throwing you the football before you're coming in the transfer portal to play for Michigan. And so kind of how I see it playing out is you got to get your answer soon. You're going to get your answer, December 4th on signing day? Then you're going to have time where that next 2 weeks, it's got to be down to business, get a quarterback committed. Then you can go out and try to convince these pass catchers to come to Michigan. You got to think outside the quarterback spot. Wide receiver is position number 2 for Michigan to aggress in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and again, that's a position, they haven't had a 4-star commit to that school since Tyler Morris, I believe it is. You got to fill that talent pool back up. You obviously see, how much emphasis been on Colson Loveland. Geez, can't believe I forgot that name. But, you see what they can't work that offense through the wide receiver position. They kind of could last year, but even last year was a fair amount of Colson Loveland. You just haven't had that guy. Again, they're going to need to figure out some way to make this a program that wide receivers want to be at. And I don't know that it's a bad way. You saw Julian Fleming go commit to Penn State. Penn State's kind of in a similar boat, probably a bigger issue than Michigan's had, obviously. But they were in a similar boat. So, again, you get a real talent who maybe didn't pan out somewhere or is looking to move. They got to do what they got to do to get a wideout because, again, it's
not a wideout, multiple. In my opinion, it is multiple wideouts, kind of like what Nebraska did. And they brought in Jamal Banks. They brought in Isaiah Nayor. And it's massively helped that Nebraska offense. I think that's what Michigan needs to do. And that's not to say, and I think a lot of Michigan fans make some really good points in the comment section. It's hard to evaluate. Tyler Morris had a really nice play for Michigan in the red zone for Davis Warren. It's hard to evaluate these wide receivers to any significant extent because they haven't had a good quarterback. But you got to think we want some proven production in this wide receiver room come 2025. What did we brought in? Amarian Walker and CJ Charleston. I can't believe that our staff thought that was going to be okay for the wide. If we needed a wide receiver, we're bringing in a fifth-year senior from Youngstown State who's caught for 700 yards in his career. It was confusing to say the least.
Again, I think, you got to give a little bit of grace because we only had the spring portal to shop, and the spring portal was bad.
Agreed.
I mean, the guy from Georgia that everyone wanted, he's not playing snaps at Minnesota. So it's you just look. It was a bare talent group. Again, I think people want to jump on Shirron Moore. you got to give them the chance to have a 2024 or 5, let's say, transfer portal cycle, because they just didn't when they won the national championship. Portals closed by the time they were in the
Yeah,
market.
and that's fair, I think. But you also like need, and this is more of a Jim Harbaugh problem than a Sherrone Moore problem. Like you need guys, even if Michigan was making the national championship this year, you need guys working in the transfer portal before you even play that national championship game. Offensive line, I'll
I
say
don't think
tackle.
I'll start a hot take. I don't really think you need to go hit the portal that hard. Like, I don't think they're playing great right now. But you talk about recruiting, like they have 2 now
Yeah,
solid classes of offensive linemen kind of coming through this program, especially the true freshmen right now. I mean, you look at
yeah,
some of them, the Spragues, the Blake
yeah,
Frazier's, like you're
yeah.
starting to build some talent through that position. I don't think the tackle position's been good enough this year. Obviously, Evan Link's been inconsistent. I do think he's had a couple of decent games, especially that Michigan State game. So I like kind of what they have coming back with him, and they do have some young talent. Then you throw in some guys like Nate Afobe and Jake Guanera. Like those guys played really well in the spring game. I'm frankly pretty comfortable with what they have in the offensive line. I don't think they need to like bring in like 3 or 4 of them. I wouldn't
That's
mind
where
bringing in one alpha dog at the left tackle spot, perhaps. But
yeah,
other than
that's
that,
kind of what I had in my notes too. Just like potentially a proven commodity starter at left tackle. That's more of like as an outside perspective, like a fan perspective, it's hard to understand. Like that's more you got to trust Shirron Moore, Grant Newsome to kind of know what you have and know what these guys might be come 2025 because we certainly don't. But there's a lot of talent and depth in that room. Anyway, if there's one thing I trust Shirron Moore with, it is offensive line development and evaluations. And so I feel like we're pretty good there. Running back, Dill, you're going to lose Donald. You're going to lose Khalil Mullings. Again, it's a low priority. And for Michigan, what I think is so important is prioritizing the positions you need to prioritize. Like, would I mind a running back that has some experience? Because guys like Ben Hall, Jordan Marshall don't have much. Yeah, sure, I would. But I don't think it's a massive, massive need for Michigan. And again, if that's going to distract you from paying attention to the positions we need to address, I wouldn't do it. Tight end, I think we're loaded. I don't think we have to have a discussion there. I think we got some. I don't know if we have a Colston Loveland in that room, but Dale, that tight end room, I think is looking really good. Defensive side of the football, obviously going to be losing a lot of players this year. Let's start on the defensive line. This is probably outside of the quarterback and wide receiver conversation. This is probably the third, and you might agree or disagree, the third position of need in the transfer portal.
I debate with that in the secondary. I'm not 100% sure which one I'd call. Again, I think you're gonna have a really interesting crop of freshmen coming up through the secondary. So I don't know if that matters. Like again, that's where a lot of the talent is. So you certainly kind of maybe like what they're gonna reload there. But the defensive line is certainly one because you're gonna lose your 2 horses. And you like the way guys like Trey Pierce and Rayshawn Benny and Ike Awuna are playing. Like I thought they've given them good minutes, but you probably are gonna need to find some depth to work in there because you don't have a ton of proven production
Yeah, I
behind
would
these
have
two.
liked to seen Michigan go and grab some depth pieces even in this offseason. But again, it's hard to criticize this staff and the lack of activity in the transfer portal. You've seen good things from Trey Pierce. I think you wish you've seen better things from Eno Etta. But again, Eno Etta was one of those guys that we knew, one, he's making a position change. Like I think he was projected to play edge, kicking on the inside. You kind of knew that wasn't going to be a year one thing. And so maybe it does click kind of like, I know different, well, kind of similar prospects like David Ajabo. Like David Ajabo, we knew it wasn't going to be a year one, year two thing, but when it clicks, it's going to click. I think if you're Michigan, like you're hoping that's Eno Etta as well. Trey Pierce, you've seen some good things from Ike as well. Probably a body or two. And again, you've seen the problem with the depth on this defensive line. Again, the offensive line hasn't helped because they can't stay on the football field. But you can tell the drop off that Michigan experiences when Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham aren't on the football field. Shout out to Mason Graham. Like it has to be so easy to kind of throw in the towel on this season. That dude plays 50 plus snaps
I
every
mean,
single
both of
game.
them. They both play so much football. They're both so consistent. They're so
Yeah,
dominant.
love those
Probably
two.
say the same thing, frankly, about Josiah Stewart. I mean, he plays
Yep.
pretty much a lot of snaps, and they kill it every week. So again, like this probably when I'm talking through this is probably a bigger situation than
Yes.
that cornerback spot, especially because again, I think you feel decent about being able to play some of the young guys coming in the 2025 class. Like I just think it's easier if you're a good athlete, like you can play in the secondary quickly. I think you see it more. You see it work more
Yeah,
often.
agreed.
Defensive line, you just don't see a ton of true freshmen coming in and eat up a lot of good
Yeah.
minutes.
Off-ball backer. Kind of interesting because I mean, Jon Barm might go to the NFL, but I don't think Ernest Hausman has put out. He could go to the NFL and be a day 3 pick, probably.
I'm
I
not sure
think
Barnes should be going either,
me
frankly.
neither.
So I think you might get them both back, and then you look behind it. I mean, Jimmy Rolder's played really well
Really
this year,
good
so
ball.
that's certainly encouraging. I think Jaden Hood's played pretty solid, so this is definitely an
You're
opposite. And then
missing.
Cole
You're missing.
Sullivan's the real
That's
one.
the same. You're missing the future All-America, baby. Cole Sullivan's sitting there, like waiting for his turn. He's going to be
Yeah, I
special,
want
I
him on
think.
the field too.
But I think you're right. Like I'm Ernest Hausman, I think will be back. Jon Barm is the one where I'm very interested to see the decision that he decides to make. And again, I'm kind of with you. Like I think there's meat left on the bone for Jon Barm. Like we all see how physically gifted this kid is. Can he come back for a senior year, put together? And you've seen Michigan guys do this before, give up a year of the NFL, come back and ball out and kind of improve your draft stock. I'm hoping Jon Barm makes that decision. Secondary, probably another big time need. And I don't know how big time it's going to be. Will Johnson's obviously gone. Amir Hall is obviously gone. Dill, you have some young cats coming up that you're really excited about. Like you start taking a look, okay, Josiah Edmond, we're all excited to see what he's going to look like year 2. Shamari Earls, to me, is a guy that can come in and play year 1. Like when he committed, like that's kind of what we said about him. I would like to see an addition of like a Josh Wallace. We don't need to go out and get like a top 10 cornerback in the transfer portal, kind of like what we did with Amir Hall. And Josh Wallace came in late from UMass and was kind of emerged as that starting cornerback opposite Will Johnson, was really steady, reliable. That's kind of the name or the type of name that I'd be looking for Michigan to go out and get in the secondary.
Yeah, but I don't think they need to like go crazy in the secondary because again, I think some of the young guys have played well. I think Brandon Hillman's played pretty good when he's been on the field. And you have 2 guys I think you'll love coming back in Zeke Berry and Jair Hill. They both look really good in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think maybe a piece or two, and it's hard to sit here right now because you're going to have guys go to the NFL. You're going to have guys enter the transfer portal who are on this Michigan roster. We just don't know yet. So we'll update this conversation as it goes. That's kind of where the boys are sitting right now. And you're going to have an adjustment as well when you see the kind of names that hit the transfer portal as well. Like you don't want to just go be grabbing names to grab names. You want to add guys that are going to be valuable assets to your team. We'll see how it plays out. I think any way you cut it, it's going to be an eventful next 2 months for Michigan on the recruiting trail, in the transfer portal. As a Michigan fan, like I'm excited for the next couple games. Fire me up for the month of December because I think there's going to be a lot of buzz around this program. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, let it fly in the comment section. A lot of different ways you can go about fixing this Michigan team heading into 2025. Would love to hear from you guys. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to y'all later.